So there's a new Star Wars movie coming out this year. It's the first one in nearly 7 years, and you couldn't pay me to give a shit. I truly do not care about new Star Wars content anymore. Editing Dak here. The Mandalorian and Grogu is actually currently in theaters. I meant for this video to come out before its release, but Disney struck the video down due to copyright. I tried to dispute it, but it took too long, so I decided to make some edits instead. Now, don't get me wrong. I loved the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, and I was very much excited about where the story was going to go after that. But once I learned that he and Grogu reunited in a completely different show almost immediately after that heartfelt goodbye, I checked out from the show. And from the sounds of it, I jumped ship at a pretty good time. So, needless to say, I have zero interest in this upcoming film, and the trailers haven't done anything to change my mind. If, however, you are excited, please understand I'm not trying to ruin that for you. I'm glad you're excited, and I hope you end up loving the film. But I'm not just disinterested in The Mandalorian, I'm disinterested in the future of Star Wars as a whole. This is due to a combination of creative decisions made by Lucasfilm and the ever-increasing toxic discourse surrounding this franchise. But it wasn't always that way. I am a huge Star Wars fan, and today I wanted to share my thoughts on why by discussing episodes 1 through 9, or what's commonly referred to as the Skywalker Saga. I could do a retrospective of the entire franchise, but I think episodes 1 through 9 are just far more interesting to talk about. Plus, I haven't seen most of the shows, and I don't feel like sitting through like 13 seasons of television. Now, before I get into this, let me just say, I've got some hot ass takes about this franchise. I guarantee I'm going to piss off at least some of you. Just keep in mind, these are just my opinions. With all of that out of the way, let's start where it all started. A New Hope. Holy shit, this movie is iconic. Now, I didn't need to rewatch any of these for this video. I'm not exaggerating when I say I've seen all 9 of these movies at least a dozen times. I just wanted to in case I caught anything new, and because it sounded fun, why not? But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't also feeling a bit jaded. Star Wars has become an exhausting topic for me, so while I wasn't necessarily dreading this, I wasn't as thrilled as I'd like to be. However, as soon as I sat down, popped this movie in, and saw this on my screen, I felt a sense of childlike giddiness. This movie is so good. No wonder this spawns such a massive franchise that is as etched into our pop culture as Greek mythology and the Bible. Is it flawless? No. But A New Hope has a certain advantage over all other Star Wars projects. It was the first one. Not only was it the first, but they made this movie on a budget of roughly $3 and exactly 2.5 hot meals. So if it feels like I'm pulling my punches while talking about this film's flaws, that's why. First of all, can we talk about how genius this opening crawl is? We kind of take it for granted nowadays, but I imagine this would have been a very bold way to start a film in 1977. But boy, did it pay off. The way the text floats away from the audience rather than just scrolling up, the yellow font, and the incredible and now very iconic Star Wars theme help this basic exposition feel grand and important. And since this continued, it really helped Star Wars films feel like an event. Now, it's common knowledge at this point that George Lucas didn't come up with this idea on his own. But it does bear repeating here. He was inspired by old serial films from the 1930s like Flash Gordon. Now, Flash Gordon would play before theatrical films back then, and since most people didn't go to the movies all the time, they had this opening crawl to help fill you in on what you missed. And since this movie is dropping you in the middle of a galaxy-spanning conflict, it helps give the audience all of the context they need to understand the story. I also love the now classic, "A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away" text that appears just before the title crawl. It really helps this story feel mythological by placing it in a time before ours rather than having it take place in the distant future. Right after the opening crawl, we cut to another iconic shot of the Empire pursuing the rebels. This moment perfectly conveys what we need to know about both factions. The Empire is powerful and larger than life, while the rebels are the underdogs of the story. Then the Empire boards the ship, and we see that not only are the rebels outnumbered, but they're also outmatched. It's kind of a running joke with Star Wars fans that stormtroopers have comically bad aim, similar to how Star Trek fans know that a red shirt means that a character is expendable, but the first time we ever see stormtroopers, they absolutely demolish the rebels. Then we get introduced to one of the greatest movie villains of all time, Darth Vader. Now, this is pure conjecture on my part, but they had to have been nervous about him, right? Like, this design could have easily been seen as a complete joke. Not just the design, but his voice too. There's behind the scenes footage of the guy in the suit, David Prowse, saying Vader's lines, and it doesn't sound nearly as intimidating.
Commander, tear this ship apart until you found those plans, and bring me the passengers. I want them alive!
Start tearing this ship apart piece by piece until you find those tapes. Find the passengers of this vessel. I want them alive!
Now don't mistake me. David Prowse did a wonderful job with the physical performance for Vader, but bringing in James Earl Jones for the voice truly made this character. RIP to both of these legends. In the first draft of the script for this video, I claimed that this decision saved the film, but after rewatching it, I don't really stand by that. This film has a lot more going for it than just the villains, but I do think this casting saved Darth Vader himself. Some may disagree, but I think the production design and cinematography are both pretty good given how low the budget was, especially on Tatooine. Those sections of the film were shot like a western, appropriately so. However, after C-3PO and R2-D2 land on Tatooine, the film grinds to a halt for a bit. This section of them wandering the desert and getting taken by Jawas is a bit too long and kinda drags. I honestly forget these scenes exist a lot of the time. Not that they don't matter to the film, but I wish they were just a bit more condensed. Then we're introduced to the greatest Star Wars character of all time, Luke Skywalker. It was honestly such a bold decision to wait over 15 minutes to introduce the main character of your trilogy, but it paid off here. Luke is such an ordinary looking guy, but the little musical cue that plays when he's introduced helps clue us into the fact that he's going to be very important. I've always loved this little motif. It invokes such a sense of whimsy and hope.
Going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Flawless line delivery, no notes. All jokes aside, I think Mark Hamill does an overall very good job portraying Luke Skywalker in this movie. This character could have easily come across as annoying and unlikable, but he didn't because of Mark Hamill. And he just seems like an overall good guy and chill dude. Of course, one of Luke's best moments in this film is the binary sunset scene. I love that the movie took time to give us this wordless moment of Luke looking off in the distance, wishing he could be off doing something more grand and heroic with his life to the incredible music. It's iconic for a reason, though I do think this little kick he does is kind of silly. The movie then really gets elevated by the introduction of Ben Kenobi, aka Obi-Wan Kenobi. Sir Alec Guinness really legitimizes this film with a certain type of gravitas. This is the point where the fantasy element of Star Wars really snaps into focus with the introduction of the concept of the Force. This could have come across as incredibly silly, but having these lines be delivered by Sir Alec Guinness really lends the proper weight to them. I also think that having the very first Force choke from Darth Vader on screen happening immediately following this moment was a stroke of genius. Just a real tell, then show moment. Just to rewind a bit, we get introduced to the lightsaber for the first time here, and it's easily the coolest science fiction weapon ever put to screen.
Father's lightsaber. Not as clumsy or random as a blaster.
Holy shit!
I mean, it's a freaking laser sword that makes cool sounds. What more could you want? Something that I just noticed on this last watch was that once R2 and C-3PO land on Tatooine, we don't cut away from that planet for roughly 28 minutes. The fact that I never noticed this is a testament to how well paced the movie is, aside from the R2 and C-3PO scenes I mentioned earlier. This has nothing substantial to do with Star Wars, but while watching this movie, I noticed just how artificial a lot of celebrities have started to look. There's no inherent shame in getting some work done, at least within reason, but it's pretty noticeable how much different actors used to look back then. I mean, look at this guy.
That haircut should be against your vows.
I think we take it for granted these days, but Vader being able to choke someone with his mind goes extremely hard. Not only does it demonstrate what the Force can do, but it also fleshes out Darth Vader as an antagonist. I love the moment when Luke goes home to find his aunt and uncle have been killed, but I do think it's a bit underacted on Mark Hamill's part. The music is really what carries this moment for me. Though I do love how Luke forces himself to look at their bodies. There's no going back for him, and he needs to be prepared for what's coming. The Jedi mind trick is also iconic, mostly due to Sir Alec Guinness's line delivery here.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
These aren't the droids we're looking for.
But it's also cool just to see another expansion of what the Force can do. It's also a genius way to illustrate something mystical when you have practically no budget and very primitive special effects. And then we get to the iconic... Sorry, I keep using that word, but that's just the perfect descriptor for this whole movie again, I'm really sorry. Cantina scene. Up until this point, it's largely been just regular people, but here we get to see just how diverse this universe truly is. All of these creatures look incredible, and the music is just too catchy. I love how easily Obi-Wan deals with these two lowlifes at the bar. I love when we get to see these wise old mentor characters show us why they are both old and wise. Then we get introduced to Han Solo. Much like Sir Alec Guinness, Harrison Ford elevates this film with his performance, but instead of the gravitas of a wise old mentor, he brings a cool, nonchalant vibe that helps this cheesy premise feel more grounded. One aspect of this movie that I think is underrated is the dynamic between Han and Obi-Wan. I feel like a lesser movie would have had Han come in and show up the lame old mentor character at every turn, but that's not the case here. Obi-Wan was able to match Han's wit with his own. This moment between Han and Greedo is great at both being an entertaining moment in and of itself and showing us how badass Han Solo is, but how did Greedo not see him reaching for his blaster? Anyways, Han shot first, now and forever. I don't care what George Lucas says. The Death Star being able to destroy planets in the first movie of this franchise is wild. Talk about establishing stakes. Then we get introduced to the now... iconic Millennium Falcon. Just an incredible design for a ship, no notes. I've always thought it was funny how powerful Han's blaster is in this moment.
Oh, geez. Take this. I can just leave. You're not even... Yeah, I'm shooting at you now. Is that even a real gun?
Jumping ahead a bit, we get to see Obi-Wan's reaction to Alderaan being destroyed by the Empire, and I love this. It elevates the Force from a superpower to a sort of deity. We also get to see Luke's first time using the Force by deflecting these blasts while effectively blindfolded. The segment where our main cast is trapped on the Death Star is my favorite part of the entire film. The stakes, the humor, the action, it's just so well done and entertaining for the most part. When I watched this movie as a kid, I would always skip to the scene where they escape Tatooine, watch all the way until they get off the Death Star, and then rewind it and start the whole section over again, to the annoyance of my entire family. This is where the humor of the film is at its strongest. This moment with Han is a classic example.
Control, situation normal.
What happened?
Had a slight weapons malfunction, but everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you?
Who is this? What's your operating number?
Boring conversation anyway.
But I love the moment where Luke convinces Han to help, not by appealing to some sense of inner heroism, but by bribing him with someone else's money. The very first lightsaber fight between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader does leave a bit to be desired though. It's really not that bad when you consider when it was made and the restricted budget they had, but when comparing it to other lightsaber fights, even the ones just in the original trilogy, it's a bit weak. There's a video here on YouTube that reimagines this fight, and I think it looks quite good. Though I don't think anybody should replace the original fight, it's just nice to see what it could have looked like with a better budget. Skipping ahead a bit, we get to the climactic final fight against the Death Star. While it is a bit underwhelming by today's standards, it was mind-blowing back in 1977. Hey look, you can see Darth Vader's eyes here. I think my biggest issue of the film comes right here at the end, which is the crew operating the Death Star's weapons goes noticeably slower here than they did when they used it on Alderaan earlier. This is one issue that can't be excused by a low budget or the time it was made in. This is simply actually a flaw in the story, but not a flaw that ruins the movie, not even close. You know what does ruin this movie though? Chewie not getting a medal. What the hell is wrong with you people? 1 out of 10, worst movie ever! But seriously, this film is a classic for a reason. I could go on about it for hours, but we really should move on to the next film on our list. But before we do, we should address the special editions of these films. You see, George Lucas actually felt somewhat unsatisfied with these movies, so he made little changes here and there to improve them? Now, I'm not going to delve too deeply into the special editions. There's plenty of places on the internet you can go to where you can see the comparisons with them and the originals, but I will say something here that might be slightly controversial. I actually don't hate the idea of filmmakers making changes to their films. Don't get me wrong, I don't want it to become an industry standard. Lord knows how something like that has affected the video game industry, but I don't think the act of making a change to an already released film is inherently bad. My biggest issue with the Star Wars special editions is that they essentially replaced the originals. If you go to Disney Plus right now or buy a Blu-ray set of these films, it's always the special editions. I actually thought the first thing Disney would do once they got the rights was remaster the original theatrical cuts for Blu-ray, but they just didn't for some reason. This bothers me because while not all of the changes made are bad, many of them are just so distracting. They decided to add a bunch of bad 90s CGI into a few shots, and it just clashes with the aesthetic so hard. But not all of the changes are bad. One that just caught my eye recently was that moment they escaped the stormtroopers by going through the blast shields. In the special edition, they say, "Close the blast doors." They close them, but the heroes narrowly escape by going through the blast doors, and then they say, "Open the blast doors! Open the blast doors!" The original cut only has the "open the blast doors" bit, and I think that change made it funnier. So going forward, I'm not going to do a play-by-play comparing the two versions of the original trilogy. I might mention a few notable changes, but I'll save my overall thoughts on which cut I think is better until the end of the review for that particular film. So what do I think of the special edition of A New Hope? Well, I don't think all of the changes are bad. Some are actually good. I still prefer the original cut on balance. The pacing and visuals are just better in that version overall. Well, I spent a lot of time on just this one film, so we should really move on to the next movie, The Empire Strikes Back. Empire is one of those rare instances where the sequel is better than the original. Here's my coldest take of the video. This is the best Star Wars movie. Even from the opening crawl, you can see this movie is going to be a banger. I love how this film lives up to its title and shows us just how powerful and menacing the Empire really is. The fact that the main characters as well as the rebellion are constantly on the back foot is so great for further fleshing out just how dangerous the antagonists are, especially Darth Vader. Don't get me wrong, he was cool in the first film, but this is where he was truly elevated to an all-time classic movie villain. We even get a hint to the big reveal here in the title crawl. We then get introduced to the ice planet Hoth, where the rebels have been hiding for the last few years. Luke's reintroduction here is simple but effective. It's very similar to his first scene in A New Hope in the sense that there is very minimal fanfare. Here, it's just a hint of his theme as he uncovers his face. Good stuff. So now we get a pretty awesome cold open involving Luke getting captured by the Wampa, but it's not entirely a disconnected sequence from the main plot. But before we get into that, one thing I want to point out is just how much better this film looks than the previous one, even though it still generally holds up. This one is shot better, it's got better special effects, and even the performances are better. George Lucas and his team knew they had made something special with the last film and took the responsibility of making a worthy sequel seriously. After Luke is captured, we get to catch up with Han and Leia and start planting more seeds for their eventual romance, which we'll dive deeper into a bit later. Han states that he needs to leave to finally pay his debt to Jabba, which makes Leia upset. Just a side note, but Bruce Boa, the actor who plays the rebel general here gives a pretty great performance here despite having such a small role. He just exudes leadership. After Han starts to leave, Leia follows, which starts the romance subplot of the film, where Leia is expressing her love for Han, albeit in her own way. This is a small detail, but I love these extras who walk by as they argue. Really helps make the world feel more alive. Then we cut back to Luke as he's stuck to the ceiling of the Wampa Cave. This isn't an issue with the film or anything, but how did it freeze his feet up there? I highly doubt it just held him while some sort of liquid froze around his feet. This makes me wonder if the Wampa has some sort of ice powers. We then get to see Luke use the Force to call his lightsaber to his hand for the first time. I love how at first he's reaching for it physically out of desperation, and once he feels his connection to the Force, he closes his eyes and focuses up. Nobody taught him he could do this. He just felt that he could, so he did. Luke's disappearance isn't just a little side adventure, it's actually important for the story. Not only does it show us Luke developing his connection to the Force, it also causes him to see Obi-Wan, who instructs him to seek out Yoda, another surviving Jedi, for more training. Not only is this important for Luke's development, but it helps flesh out Han Solo as well. Seeing Han get after people for not knowing where Luke is shows us just how capable a leader he is despite his suave, carefree demeanor. Not only that, but we get to see his bravery and his competency when he manages to find Luke. Cutting open his tauntaun to use its body heat for Luke was some great out-of-the-box thinking on his part. Am I the only one that still thinks it's kind of weird to see Han use a lightsaber? It just feels off. And then we get to this moment. I know. Luke and Leia incest joke number 3458. But it bears repeating. As a side note, Luke's face here a moment prior to this absolutely kills me.
I think you just can't bear to let a gorgeous guy like me out of your sight.
The Empire then discovers where the rebels have been hiding, which leads to the incredible battle on Hoth. Here's a fun fact. I actually have a cameo in this movie.
Feeling all right, sir?
Just like new, Dak. How about you?
Right now, I feel I can take on the whole Empire myself.
They were worried I was gonna steal the entire movie, so they killed me off. But it still remains the highlight of my entire career, despite the fact that I was negative 15 years old at the time. On a serious note, this sequence is amazing. I love the design of the AT-ATs. The Empire could have just sent down some generic-looking sci-fi tanks, but these invoke a more primal fear into you by resembling some large beast hunting you rather than a vehicle operated by soldiers, similar to the tripods in War of the Worlds. I love the detail that their armor is too strong for blasters. They easily could have just had them use shields, again, like War of the Worlds, and that would have worked just fine, but this gives them a more robust feeling that's appropriate for their design. And this sequence really lives up to the title of the film. The Empire do be striking back. Something that I appreciate is that even though the rebels are clearly outmatched, they still have moments of victory. That little push and pull goes a long way to establishing tension. Giving the audience just a little bit of hope that they might win makes it all the more worse when they eventually lose. It's similar to watching a football game. When your team is on the back foot but still scoring, you feel that they can turn it around, which keeps you invested. When your team gets dominated the entire time, you kind of just tune out for most of it, or at least I do. One such example of a small victory is when Luke takes out this AT-AT. Not only does it give you that sense of hope that I just mentioned, but it helps flesh out Luke as a badass and why having a Force user on your side is useful. But eventually, the rebels lose this fight. Fun story about me, when I was in elementary school, me and my friends loved playing like we were in Star Wars, like a lot of kids did. One morning before school started, I couldn't find any of my friends, so I decided to do it just by myself. I started reenacting this movie specifically, quoting it and everything. When I got to this line specifically,
"Yes, Lord Vader. I've reached the main power generators. The shield will be down in moments. You may start your landing."
I noticed then that a kid had been watching me basically talk to myself, and he gave me this look. Not that I blame him, I must have looked crazy. After the Empire defeats the rebels on Hoth, our main cast are split up and we get our A and B plots. Instead of going through the movie chronologically, I'll just go through each of these one at a time, starting with Han, Leia, Chewie, and C-3PO. First of all, I love the hard cut to the Empire pursuing the Millennium Falcon. This movie rarely has a moment of respite in this opening act, which again plays into the title and premise. Secondly, look how good these special effects are. Not just good for 1980, but good in a timeless way. Then we learn that the Millennium Falcon's faster than light travel isn't working properly, so they don't have an easy exit strategy. This was actually set up earlier on Hoth, but I love the running gag that while Han is an exceptional pilot, he's kind of a subpar mechanic.
Alright, that's it. Right.
But Han is not one who gives up easily, so he heads into an asteroid field in a desperate attempt to escape their pursuers. And this entire sequence is great, mostly the music. I especially love this little sound that accompanies the Falcon as it enters the cave of this asteroid. Also, it's cute that C-3PO hugged Chewie right here. This is where we get a really f***ing hell. This is where we get a really good look at how cold, calculated, and determined Darth Vader is. He doesn't care that they just went into an asteroid field. He's more than willing to sacrifice his own troops to pursue them, and force choke anybody that's not willing to obey his orders. I love this little detail where you see the bridge of one of the Star Destroyers get hit by an asteroid, and then one of the holograms that's speaking to Darth Vader disappears. Vader doesn't even make a remark about it. That's how bad this guy's tunnel vision is. Tunnel vision that is tied to the biggest and most well-known twist in movie history. One could argue that it's not even a twist anymore because of how popular it is, but we'll get to that later. We even get a little peek behind the helmet of Darth Vader here. Our first hint that there might be more to this guy than we originally thought. We then get another first look, this time of the Emperor. He was briefly mentioned in the last film, but here we get to put a face to his name. Well, technically two faces now. In the original cut, the Emperor was portrayed by a woman named Marjorie Eaton and dubbed by a man named Clive Revell. I hope I pronounced those right. The special edition replaces them both with Ian McDiarmid, who played the Emperor in Return of the Jedi, the prequel trilogy, The Rise of Skywalker, and the Kenobi series. I almost prefer the special edition. Ian McDiarmid does a better job, has a more menacing voice and presence, and the makeup looks much better as well. The only thing that makes me torn on it are the slight changes made to the dialogue. In the original cut, after the Emperor says, "We have a new enemy, Luke Skywalker," Vader says, "Yes, my master," in a tone that suggests that he knows who Luke is, and the way the Emperor says the son of Skywalker tells us that they both know that Luke is Vader's son. This makes sense. The title crawl tells us that Vader is obsessively pursuing Luke, which only makes sense with that context. In the special edition, the dialogue is updated so that Palpatine is the one to tell Vader that Luke is his son, and Vader acts surprised by this.
I have no doubt this boy is the offspring of Anakin Skywalker.
How is that possible?
This means that Vader just so happened to be desperately seeking out the man who just so happens to be his son without even realizing it until this point. Some may argue that this change was made to accommodate the prequels, but that doesn't actually make sense. There's nothing in the prequels that makes it so Vader couldn't have learned of his son off screen the way that was shown in the original cut. I do wish the movies elaborated on how he found out, but this wasn't the right solution. But let's jump back to Han and Leia. Their time on the asteroid is where their romance truly manifests itself. I'm about to say something that's going to get me absolutely flayed alive, but this element of the movie hasn't aged the best. Oh god, no, wait, please, just hear me out, wait! Now, narratively, there's nothing wrong here. This works perfectly fine with both of these characters and this story. It all feels like a natural progression. What hasn't aged so well is the potential example Han is setting for younger viewers, especially young men. Cornering someone and telling them that they are in fact interested in you despite their insistence to the contrary, and then kissing them is generally not a good way to flirt. Now, it works here because Leia is, in fact, interested in Han. There is often a fine line between being romantic and being creepy, and that fine line is called consent. I do want to reiterate, it works in the movie, and I'm not saying we should cancel the film or Han Solo. I'm only saying that this is not a form of flirting you should model. Minor nitpick, but Han's mouth doesn't actually move when he's speaking here. Just how awesome is this scene? finding out the cave they're hiding in isn't a cave, but rather the Alaskan bullworm in space? Why don't we just take the asteroid and push it somewhere else? We then get introduced to one of the coolest bad guys in this movie, Boba Fett. It's amazing how popular this guy became, despite the fact that he never once kills anyone in this entire trilogy. I'm not even saying that as a bad thing. Not only are his design and voice badass, there's subtle hints of just how dangerous and competent this guy is. Chris Stuckman pointed this out in his review of the film, but Darth Vader has hired bounty hunters to track down the Millennium Falcon, and Boba Fett is among them. Vader singles him out specifically when he says not to kill them, suggesting that he has a ruthless reputation. Another change that I'm not a fan of is the change to Boba Fett's voice. I do prefer the original.
He's no good to me dead. He's no good to me dead.
I get the lore reason why they changed it, and believe me, I'll get to that when we start talking about the prequels, but I still prefer how he sounds in the original cut. It also says a lot that he's the only one who didn't fall for Han's trick by pretending to be a piece of garbage in space to avoid the Empire. This is just a little detail, but I've always loved the blue light here while they're looking for places to hide. I just think it looks neat. Plus, I love how they kept the actors in frame instead of showing us what's on the screen. We know what they're looking at through context clues, so they instead focus on the performances. We then get to meet another iconic Star Wars character, Lando Calrissian. He's a smooth talker like Han, but he still has his own distinct energy, due in large part to Billy D. Williams' excellent performance. Think about how easily this character could have failed. Lando is a character that gets introduced as an old friend of Han Solo, who then betrays him to the Empire, then goes against the Empire to save Han. Keep in mind that the movie is 2 hours, 6 minutes, and 26 seconds long, including the credits. Lando gets introduced roughly at the 1 hour, 20 minute mark. That means they had to achieve this in the last 30 minutes of the movie. This is a character who so easily could have come off as messy and inconsistent with a less competent creative team. But because of the excellent writing and performance, Lando Calrissian became a fan favorite of the franchise. I love this brief scene where it's revealed Darth Vader is in Cloud City. Han immediately shooting is very in character, despite having no effect on him. I don't know if there's a deleted scene of it, or if it was always meant to just hard cut to the next scene, but I wish we got to see the discussion that followed after the doors closed here. Vader tortures and then imprisons Han in carbonite just to make sure that 1, Luke will get visions which will draw him to Cloud City, and 2, make sure that Luke will survive that process, which is just so cold. Vader is a ruthless and calculated bastard, almost literally, which we'll get into soon. And of course, we're going to talk about it. This is when we get the famous line,
I love you.
I know.
Impressive. Very nice.
And with that, let's rewind and talk about what Luke has been up to this whole time. It's all common knowledge now, but having Dagobah be a swamp is a great subversion of expectations, which can equally be said about Yoda himself. Speaking of which, Yoda is instantly likable.
I am wondering, why are you here?
I'm looking for someone.
Looking? Found someone you have, I would say.
Cosmonaut Variety Hour made a similar point in his M. Night Shyamalan video, but it takes a lot of skill to write a character who is annoying to the other characters in the movie without being annoying to the audience. Yoda annoying Luke isn't just done for comedic relief, but also to test Luke's patience in order to see if he's ready to become a Jedi. There's a neat little implication that while Yoda views Luke as an instrument to destroy Darth Vader, a task which is really time sensitive, he values the Force more by not rushing this kind of training. It's just far too sacred for him to do that. His shift in demeanor when he drops the clown act is incredible. The fact that he could go from silly to a sage old mentor so effortlessly is just amazing. Kudos to Frank Oz for such amazing voice work and puppeteering. I don't know why, but this line has always been a vocal stim for me.
Never his mind on where he was. What he was doing.
Luke and Yoda then train, which gives us not 1, but 2 all-time classic movie lines.
All right, I'll give it a try.
No. Try not. Do. Or do not. There is no try.
I don't believe it.
That is why you fail.
But we're not going to sleep on Mark Hamill's performance here. He does an amazing job, especially considering he had to act alongside a puppet for most of the movie, which is a sentiment that was also expressed by Frank Oz and Irving Kershner, the film's director. There is one question I have though. When Luke is preparing to leave to fight Vader, Obi-Wan shows up as a Force ghost and says he cannot interfere. Why is that? In A New Hope, he tells Vader that if he was killed, he'd become more powerful than he could possibly imagine, but that doesn't seem to carry over to this movie. Now, I get there could be more than one way to interpret the term powerful, but it's just always been something I've wondered about, so I'm not counting this as a major criticism of the film, but if anyone has the answer, feel free to share it down below. Then we get the ultimate showdown that this film has been building up to for its entire runtime: Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader. Please forgive me, I'm going to rave about this scene for a minute. Firstly, the way Luke comes up through this entrance on the floor feels like a video game. You know, when you enter the boss room in a dungeon, and I mean that in a positive way. I love the visual storytelling of Luke looking at his blaster and holstering it. He knows that weapon won't do him any good here. A lesser script might have had Vader come out and explicitly say that. So I appreciate them taking a more subtle route here. The backdrop of this fight, at least the first half, is gorgeous. The blue and oranges contrast quite nicely with each other. I also love the use of silhouettes. I think it's a nice touch that after Luke draws his lightsaber, you can see Vader already had his in his hand, ready to ignite it. Nice, subtle way of showing that Vader has been wanting this confrontation all movie. Many have pointed this out, but a lot of the time Vader fights one-handed, showing off just how much more skilled he is than Luke. You can tell that he's just toying with Luke. Other movies like Rogue One would go on to show us just how much he was toying with him, but you still understand that going off of this movie alone. I mean, look how easily he disarms him here. The icing on the cake is this comes right after Luke says, "I think you'll find I'm full of surprises." It's almost as if Vader took the opportunity to humble him here. Although the little jump he does here is kinda goofy. I love how after Luke escapes the carbonite chamber, Vader isn't fazed in the slightest.
Perhaps you are not as strong as the Emperor thought. Impressive. Most impressive.
You'd almost expect he'd be more pissed that his plan just failed, but that's not who Vader is. And just how cool is it that the Imperial March starts to play as Vader begins to incorporate the Force into this fight. It really starts to feel like the second phase of the boss fight. But Vader eventually gets fed up with the games. At the end, he's no longer fighting in a casual way, opting instead for heavy two-handed swings as you can feel his anger taking over. God, I love the way this shot is framed. Putting an emphasis on just how high up they are really adds to the tension. The final straw for Vader is when Luke manages to score a hit on him, and that's where he decides that he's done with this fight. We take it for granted now since losing a hand becomes somewhat of a common occurrence in Star Wars, but it's still jarring to see a main character get dismembered like this in a family-friendly film. You just don't see that too often. Then we get the greatest movie twist of all time.
No, I am your father.
Even though I know it's coming, this still gives me goosebumps, especially in context with the rest of the film. Though Mark Hamill's delivery here isn't the best, definitely overacted in my opinion. But it doesn't ruin the moment, and to his credit, this really is the only time his performance falters in this movie. This twist really muddies the waters of this conflict. Now Luke has a personal connection to the main bad guy. It's no longer as simple a story as good versus evil. Another reveal that often gets overshadowed is that Vader doesn't really have any love or undying loyalty to the Emperor.
You can destroy the Emperor. Join me, And together, we can rule the galaxy as father and son.
Luke refuses, opting to die before joining his father. He does end up surviving, where Leia, Chewie, and Lando rescue him. Here's another change to the special edition that I don't care for.
Bring my shuttle. Alert my Star Destroyer to prepare for my arrival.
I like how upset Vader sounds in the original. His son just rejected him, so it makes sense that he's just barely holding himself together. After they rescue Luke and escape the Empire, that's really where the movie ends. Luke gets a new robotic hand, while Lando and Chewie go to find Han. Though it is weird that Lando is wearing Han's clothes here for some reason, though I'm hardly the first guy to point that out. I mean, Family Guy beat me to that almost 2 decades ago.
Why are you wearing Han's clothes? Seriously, watch the actual movie. Lando is wearing Han's clothes in this scene. It's really weird.
Anyways, this is a pretty iconically bleak ending. Whenever there's a movie that ends on a dark note, it tends to be described as an Empire Strikes Back ending. Avengers Infinity War and The Two Towers are both examples of this. Well, that was The Empire Strikes Back. In my not at all controversial opinion, the magnum opus of Star Wars. My thoughts on the special edition of this movie are that it's actually pretty unintrusive and even better in some areas. This is the one where I could honestly watch either version and be fine with it. Let's see how they manage to follow up this masterpiece with the next entry in the saga, Return of the Jedi. I'm just gonna come out and say this right at the beginning here. This movie is the weakest of the original trilogy. Is it bad? Dear God, no. Not even close. In fact, this was my favorite of the original trilogy from my childhood through to my teenage years. But once I reached adulthood and started viewing films more critically, the more cracks I started to notice. I think I loved it so much when I was younger because it has some amazing moments, some of the best in all of Star Wars if we're being honest. But as a film, it's more flawed than the previous two, similar to The Dark Knight Rises when you compare it to Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. But enough of the preamble. Let's dive into this. To start things off, we learn that there's another Death Star. Logically, there's nothing wrong with this. I mean, why wouldn't the Empire want to improve upon such a deadly and effective weapon? But creatively, it's a bit derivative. We get our first real introduction to the Emperor here, and I love the way Vader sets him up.
The Emperor is not as forgiving as I am.
Ian McDiarmid absolutely crushes this role. Just the right amount of menace and chewing of the scenery. He's a gross, slimy, and decrepit politician who just happens to know space magic, which contrasts very nicely with Vader's more militaristic appearance and persona. Here's a weird fact. Ian McDiarmid is only 7 years older than Mark Hamill. That's how good the makeup is here. Then we get to see Jabba the Hutt for the first time, unless you watch the special editions. And I just love how gross he is. He's like the personification of greed. His palace is also appropriately uninviting, claustrophobic, and messy. One of the most jarring special edition changes is this little dance sequence. I mostly watched the special editions growing up, so this is what I was used to. It was kind of a mental flashbang when I watched the original cut and saw this. And while the special edition version is funny for the memes, I greatly prefer the original. The CGI in the special edition is just really awkward, and the song is so bombastic and in your face that it becomes a little distracting. And to make matters worse, Boba Fett is here. Surely this will raise the stakes for our heroes, right? While I do think this movie is flawed, there is a common complaint about this section that I don't agree with. Not fully, at least. People tend to argue that Luke's plan for breaking out Han Solo makes zero sense.
The structure of this movie is also completely f***ed. The whole first act is centered around this absolutely f***ed insane plan that Luke comes up with, where he just allows himself and all his friends to get captured just so he can launch an all-out brawl with Jabba in the desert. Couldn't he just go there with his lightsaber and his friends and fight everybody? If that was your plan from the start, then why don't you just do it here?
Complaints like this tend to be based on the idea that the way this all played out is exactly the way Luke planned for it to. And I just don't think that's the case here. I think each step was intended to be the last and actually succeed, with each following plan being a backup. When Luke offers up R2-D2 and C-3PO, you'll notice Lando is already there. He was more than likely going to be who got them all out if they succeeded. Leia damn near succeeded in getting him out, but was caught at the last minute. Though I will concede that Luke acts somewhat foolishly after entering Jabba's palace, C-3PO straight up says,
Master Luke, you're standing on...
And Luke doesn't think to move or react in any way for some reason. He doesn't even look at C-3PO. Then he just decides to grab a blaster while he's surrounded. He doesn't even stand in an area that is tactically advantageous for this. This section of Luke's plan was definitely not well thought out, but the rest of it is fine. I love Harrison Ford's performance after he's unfrozen. He plays sick and disoriented very well here. I also really like this line.
Luke's crazy. He can't even take care of himself. A Jedi Knight. I'm out of it for a little while. Everybody gets delusions of grandeur.
I'm far from the first to point this out, but this movie also has aged the worst out of the original trilogy when it comes to the visuals. The green screen they use when they're out in the desert looks atrocious. Some other examples would be Han being unfrozen from the carbonite and the speeder chase through the forest. But Dak, this movie was made in the 80s. You can't judge it for dated effects, I'm sure some of you are saying. And sure, that's a valid point, but I still think they pushed it a bit too far in some areas. I think less would have been more here. Then we get to the Sarlacc pit, where we get to see just how far Luke has come with his abilities as a Jedi. Not only has he mastered his emotions and his ability to use the Force much better, but he's also built himself a new lightsaber. This is my favorite lightsaber in all of Star Wars. I love its design, which is clearly inspired by Obi-Wan's, which I think is heartwarming on Luke's part. I love what it represents in Luke's journey, and the sound it makes when ignited is unique from other lightsabers.
The blaster.
Then we get a pretty exciting action scene where our heroes escape Jabba. Don't have much to say, it's just awesome. Well, except for the fact that Boba Fett goes out in the dumbest way possible. This feels like something you'd see on SNL, and it's so disrespectful to a character as cool as Boba Fett. This would have been very fitting for Jabba the Hutt, but not this badass. And I know he survives this and goes on to have more stories both in the books and in some Disney Plus shows, but I don't feel like opening that can of worms if I'm being honest. Anyways, the heroes escape Jabba's palace, and I gotta say, I love the music here. Jabba the Hutt, while not a main antagonist, was still a looming shadow over Han Solo, and now that weight has been removed from his shoulders, which is reflected in the music here. We then get Yoda's only real scene in this movie, which is strange because he's one of the characters on the DVD case. Something that never really bothered me when I was younger, but I can't help but feel slightly annoyed by now. This is Luke's first time seeing Yoda since the last movie. Now, that wouldn't be so bad if there hadn't been a year between the two films, which is made even worse because Yoda dies here, kind of unexpectedly, so we don't really get to see much of him. Another thing that I feel is undercooked is the fact that Luke is so much more of a badass now, but he really hasn't had any more instruction from a master. Now, I get why they had Yoda die here. It makes sense for Luke's story that the torch is passed on to him, and if they had him training with Yoda for the entire second act of this movie, it would just feel like a retread of Empire Strikes Back. I think a good solution here would be to tell the audience that Luke has been coming back here for additional training off screen. Nitpicking aside, I still do like this scene. Yoda is just as charming as ever, and his death is still really sad, especially when Luke watches the fire in his hut go out. But right before he passes on, he drops a bombshell that Luke has another relative out there, who he deduces to be Leia after a talk with Obi-Wan. Just as a side note, I love Luke's reaction to Obi-Wan's justification for lying to him about Darth Vader.
Your father was seduced by the dark side of the Force. He ceased to be Anakin Skywalker and became Darth Vader. So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
A certain point of view?
I think one of my biggest problems with this movie is that the second act was kind of dull. I'm not saying nothing of interest happens, but it's just not as well paced or exciting as the first two films, or even the first and third act in this film. Why are Han and Lando immediately so chummy with each other? Last time Han saw Lando, he had just betrayed him and turned him over to the Empire. And yet, the first time he sees him, they're all buddy-buddy. I feel like we missed a scene here. Chris Stuckman also pointed this out in his review of the film, but I don't agree with him that there should have been a confrontation between these two, at least not necessarily. I think a simple exchange where Lando tries to apologize, but Han interrupts him by saying, "Leia and Chewie told me what you did to help them escape and to rescue me. As far as I'm concerned, we're even." Would have sufficed. Also, look how bad this shot looks here. It looks like a painting of the Millennium Falcon rather than the real thing, which it technically is a painting, but in universe it's supposed to be the real ship. But instead, it looks like these two are standing in front of a mural of the Millennium Falcon. Something I noticed while watching the movie for this video is Han Solo feels a bit more like Indiana Jones in this moment here on Endor. He gets in a little scrap with a stormtrooper that feels like it could have come straight out of an Indiana Jones movie. As far as I know, Han Solo never got in a hand-to-hand fight before this moment, which is why it stood out to me. Then I realized Raiders of the Lost Ark came out between Empire and Jedi, and it all made sense. This isn't a bad thing, by the way, just something that stood out to me. Despite it not looking too good visually by today's standards, I still do really like the speeder chase Luke and Leia get into with the stormtroopers. I feel like I haven't emphasized this enough, but Luke is such a badass in this movie. I love the way he cuts the speeder down here with his lightsaber. Then we get introduced to the locals of Endor, the Ewoks, who are basically just living teddy bears. I know the Ewoks are super divisive, but I actually don't mind them, at least conceptually. My issue is more so how the plot grinds to a halt to engage in Ewok shenanigans. Our heroes getting stuck in a trap, captured by the Ewoks, the misunderstanding with them thinking C-3PO was some sort of god, them eventually befriending them and telling them stories around the campfire, just feels like such a poor use of time in the conclusion to this trilogy. I love this scene where Luke tells Leia that she's his sister. Mark Hamill gives such a strong performance here. I also think it's just a tender moment, though there is one little caveat.
My sister has it. Yes. It's you, Leia.
I know. Somehow, I've always known.
Kind of makes it a bit more awkward than it needs to be, doesn't it? And yes, I know I am far from the first person to make this joke, but I just couldn't help it. Then we get to my second favorite scene of this movie, which is where Luke surrenders to Darth Vader and they have an emotionally charged conversation. One of the first things that I noticed is that Luke is the shortest person in this scene. It's a really neat way to visually tell us that the odds are not in his favor here. I also really love this comment here on YouTube. Even though Vader has Luke at a disadvantage physically, Luke is the one with all of the power emotionally. You really start to see the cracks here in Vader when Luke calls him father. He feels the pull back to the light side, but isn't quite ready to unlearn 20 years of hatred and misery. The way Vader snaps at Luke here,
I've accepted the truth that you were once Anakin Skywalker, my father.
That name no longer has any meaning for me.
Tells me that he doesn't quite believe what he's saying. I love how Vader can't help but be a proud father here, admiring Luke's lightsaber despite himself. I also love this flash of fear Luke has when Vader ignites his lightsaber, especially after just saying that Vader couldn't bring himself to kill Luke, showing us that Vader may not be the only one here who's feeling a little bit conflicted.
I will not turn, and you'll be forced to kill me.
If that is your destiny.
Vader's hesitation says a lot here.
Then my father is truly dead.
Even though we can't see his face, you can feel that Luke's words had a deep impact on him. Also, you just know these two had the juiciest gossip by the water cooler after this. Now we get to the climax, which features 3 separate battles. Instead of jumping back and forth between them chronologically, I'm just going to tackle them one at a time. The first one I want to talk about is the one where I actually have the least amount to say, the space battle outside the Death Star. It's just cool, easily the best battle involving ships in the whole trilogy. It's neat to see Lando take command here. The special effects look fine for the most part, and we got the classic line, "It's a trap!" It's all just very neat. Then we have the battle on Endor with Han and Leia leading the charge. This is my least favorite part about the third act. I don't think it's bad by any means, it's just the most lackluster part of the climax here. There's still some cool stuff here. I like this AT-AT Walker getting destroyed by logs. I love this line.
You rebel scum.
God damn, that man really clocked in for that one line, didn't he? I like the throwback to the "I know" moment from the last movie.
I love you.
I know. I love you.
I know.
And I love seeing how far Han has come in the trilogy when he has this conversation with Leia.
You love him, don't you?
Yes.
All right. I understand. When he comes back, I won't get in the way.
It's not like that at all. He's my brother.
I do, however, have a few issues with this part of the climax. 2 big ones, really. Firstly, I'm among those that find it a little unbelievable that the Ewoks were able to pose such a huge threat to the Empire. Remember, the Emperor specifically said these troops were hand-picked for this mission, so these aren't your average stormtroopers, or at least they shouldn't be. I think an easy fix here would be to make it so these little cute and marketable Ewoks are just the adolescents of their species, while the adults are far bigger and stronger, similar to the Kalisk from Predator Badlands. The other big issue I have isn't something that's in this battle, but rather what isn't. A missed opportunity. I think Boba Fett should have been here, participating in the battle. Imagine this. Boba Fett falls into the Sarlacc pit just like he did in the beginning, but before the movie fully cuts away from Tatooine, you see him make his way out. Now, he wants revenge. So he decides to help the Empire for free. Killing Han Solo would be reward enough for him. Then we could have this badass showdown between the two where Han is clearly at a disadvantage. Then, through his sheer wit, Han comes out on top. Others have expressed this idea, but I had it long before I saw it anywhere on YouTube. Just goes to show how obvious of an improvement it would have been. Alright, now let's move on to the final confrontation between Luke and Darth Vader. First of all, the Emperor is the ultimate rage baiter. He wants Luke to give in to his hate, and he can sense how much anger Luke has underneath his stoic and confident demeanor. So he's just pushing all of the right buttons. He even tries to give Luke a false sense of confidence here.
You no longer need those. Guards, leave us.
I do love Vader's reaction here when Luke talks back to the Emperor.
In time, you will call me Master.
You're gravely mistaken.
But eventually Luke gives in to his hate and attempts to kill the Emperor. Vader, still under his thumb, steps in to defend him. The Emperor's laugh here is great. He's successfully pitted a father against his son, which is ripe for all of those negative emotions. This is my favorite lightsaber duel in the entire Skywalker saga. Not only have they really fine-tuned the choreography here, there's just a lot at stake emotionally. Luke is not only fighting his father, he's fighting for him, for his soul. He's fighting to defeat the Emperor to save his loved ones. Vader is fighting because he feels he has no choice but to defend his master. And the Emperor is happy no matter who wins because he feels he'll still have a powerful servant regardless. Look how intently he's watching this fight. He's enjoying the amount of suffering this father and son pair are enduring. Then we get to my favorite scene not only in this movie, but all of Star Wars. Luke is hiding from Vader. Vader is attempting to pull Luke to the dark side one last time, and Luke isn't able to resist it fully. His emotions are too close to the surface, which allows Vader to use them against him. I love this shot of Luke. His face is half in the light, half in the dark. Obvious symbolism, but effective. Vader discovers that Leia is Luke's sister, which means she's his daughter. Vader makes one veiled threat about her to Luke, and he fully gives in to his hate.
If you will not turn to the dark side, then perhaps she will.
We then see Luke, for the first time, overwhelm and overpower Darth Vader. I love how the choreography gets really sloppy here, showing us just how enraged Luke is. This shot of them going behind the stairs where you can only see their silhouettes and the glow of their lightsabers is my favorite shot from any Star Wars project. And then Luke wins, cutting off Vader's hand in revenge. I love how it's the Emperor's theme that plays here, rather than something heroic, telling us that the real winner was him, not Luke. The Emperor is thrilled with this outcome. He just saw firsthand how dangerous Luke is when he gives in to the dark side. He then demands Luke join him. In a really great show don't tell moment, we see Luke notice that Vader's hand was cybernetic, just like his own, showing himself and the audience that he's becoming Vader. After he has this realization, he tosses away his lightsaber and refuses to join him, giving us his best moment in this trilogy.
I'll never turn to the dark side. You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Ah, chills. Literal chills.
I love this pregnant pause the Emperor gives here. I like to imagine he was searching Luke for any hint of doubt or conflict, but when he found conviction, only then does he say,
"So be it, Jedi."
Then we get to see just how outclassed Luke is here when the Emperor shoots lightning from his fingertips.
Come on now. Hands. Lightning with my hands. Lightning with my hands. Lightning with my hands.
This really highlights just how much more to the Force there really is. I love/hate how he's clearly taking it easy so he can drag out Luke's suffering. The way his face drops when he decides to stop playing with his food is chilling. It used to scare me when I was a kid. Just look at the deep hatred he has on his face. This isn't a game to him anymore. Then we get the true emotional climax to this movie and to this trilogy. That still gets me. Even editing this section of the video had me feeling emotional. Without any dialogue and without being able to see his face, you can tell that Anakin is conflicted. He eventually decides to turn on the Emperor and help his son. Anakin saved Luke because Luke saved him. This is where I talk about my most hated change the special editions made. Part of what makes this moment so good was the subtlety I just mentioned. You can feel what Anakin is feeling despite him not saying anything. Well, George Lucas decided subtlety was for cowards and decided to add this. God, that pisses me off. Anyways, Anakin's heroic act unfortunately caused his suit, which keeps him alive, to malfunction. He has minutes left to live and decides he wants at least one moment to look at his son with his own eyes. After this, Anakin Skywalker dies. Darth Vader had died moments earlier. It's strange that we spend most of this trilogy viewing Vader as a threat, yet we cry at his eventual death scene. That's how powerful his sacrifice was. Luke then gives him an isolated funeral with only himself in attendance, which makes sense. I can understand why the rebellion as a whole wouldn't want to mourn someone who had been hunting and killing them for years despite his sacrifice. It makes me wonder if Luke ever told anyone what happened. I could see him confiding this in Leia, maybe Han, but no one outside of that. Then we get an epilogue of sorts, where we get to see our band of heroes celebrating their victory over the Empire with the Ewoks while listening to the Yub Nub song. I enjoy this ending, even if it's a bit cheesy and simplistic. I love the way Luke sees the Force ghosts of Yoda and Obi-Wan until a mysterious third Force ghost appears of a man we've never seen before, until we realize we have seen this man before. It's Anakin Skywalker, just without the Darth Vader suit. I love the implication that only Luke is seeing them. Leia comes over to him but doesn't react to their presence in any way. And you really couldn't ask for a better shot to close out this trilogy than this one. Of course, I have to talk about the special edition changes made to this scene, of which there are 3. The first change is that they show how the galaxy at large reacts to the Emperor's death by cutting to different planets celebrating. I like this. Helps make the victory feel more impactful. The second change is the music. It feels more orchestral and less diegetic than Yub Nub, which suits the more grand feeling of this ending. I also like this change. The third and final change is one I do not care for. You see, these special editions were released after the prequel trilogy had come out, so they decided to replace the actor who played Anakin in this movie, Sebastian Shaw, with Hayden Christensen, who plays Anakin in the prequels. I find this a lot less impactful. I prefer the, oh shit, that's Anakin feeling the original gives you since you haven't seen him look like this before. I also just think it's disrespectful to replace Sebastian Shaw like this, especially given he doesn't have nearly as much screen time as Anakin as Hayden Christensen does. This is made even worse because the original cuts of these films are getting harder to find, at least legally. And keep in mind, I'm not some Gen Xer who watched the original trilogy in theaters. I was born in the mid-90s and grew up on the prequels, and I still don't like this change. Overall, I think the special edition of Return of the Jedi is the worst one of the 3. I can tolerate A New Hope's, and I can take or leave Empires, but I will always watch the original version of Return of the Jedi as long as I can. So, that was the original trilogy of Star Wars. Even though there's far more Star Wars content out there beyond this, you really don't need anything else. This is a complete story that's basically perfect. I wish I could say it ended here. I think the franchise would ultimately be better off if it did. I'm sure a lot of you are hearing this thinking, yeah, it was all great until Disney ruined it. Star Wars had problems long before Disney took over. With that, I say we move on to the prequel era in the next video. Yeah, I plan to cover the entire Skywalker saga in one go, but this video is already over an hour long, and I've been working on it for more than 2 months now. So, I decided to split it up into 3 videos. Next part will be covering the prequel era. The third and final part will talk about Disney's trilogy. So keep your eye out for those. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this video. What do you think? What Star Wars hot takes do you have? Whatever your thoughts are, comment down below and let me know. Please like, subscribe, and as always, take care.